monster is here! She's got the gauntlet!
Wow, that took a hard left.
Our village is gone because of you.
The Emperor has taken away your title of Dragon Master!
Kung Fu Panda, the Dragon Knight, arrives as a bold expansion of a beloved universe, taking a character who has long been associated with a single valley and opening his journey to the wider world. By the time this chapter begins, Po is no longer the unlikely hero fumbling his way into destiny. He is a recognized warrior, comfortable with who he is, yet quietly restless. Peace has settled in the Valley of Peace, and with peace comes a question that heroes often face after their greatest battles are won. What comes next when the world no longer needs saving every day? That question becomes the emotional undercurrent of the story, giving weight to the adventure that follows. The catalyst arrives in the form of a mysterious threat tied not to one villain, but to power itself. The existence of 4 ancient weapons, each imbued with immense destructive potential, reframes the stakes immediately. These are not relics meant to inspire or guide. They are tools capable of reshaping the balance of the world. When a cunning pair of weasels set their sights on collecting these weapons, the danger feels different from past enemies. This is not about revenge or personal grudges. It is about ambition, greed, and the terrifying simplicity of power falling into the wrong hands. The threat is quiet at first, unfolding through whispers and theft rather than open war, which makes it all the more unsettling. Po's involvement begins not with a grand call to action, but with a personal reckoning. For all his accomplishments, he is forced to confront the idea that being a hero is not a permanent title. It must be earned again and again. When circumstances push him beyond the familiar borders of his home, Po is faced with doubt, guilt, and the fear that he may no longer be the right warrior for the moment. This sense of displacement is crucial because it reframes Po not as the confident dragon warrior, but as a traveler searching for relevance in a world that has grown larger than him. The journey takes a decisive turn with the introduction of Wandering Blade, a knight from far beyond the lands Po knows. Where Po is warm, expressive, and guided by emotion, Wandering Blade is disciplined, restrained, and shaped by loss. Her worldview is built on duty and honor, sharpened by betrayal and a history that has taught her to trust principles more than people. Voiced by Rita Ora, the character carries a distinct energy that contrasts sharply with Po's familiar rhythm, and it is precisely this contrast that drives much of the story's tension and humor. Their partnership is not immediate or easy. In fact, it is born from necessity rather than trust. Wandering Blade sees Po less as a legend and more as an obstacle, questioning whether his reputation is deserved. Po, in turn, struggles to understand her rigid code and emotional distance. This dynamic gives the narrative a grounded emotional arc, as both characters must confront their assumptions about heroism. Po learns that being a symbol does not excuse failure, while Wandering Blade learns that strength without compassion can become its own form of weakness. As the quest unfolds across different regions of the world, the series embraces a globe-trotting structure that feels fresh within the Kung Fu Panda universe. Each new location adds texture to the story, expanding the cultural and philosophical landscape beyond what has been seen before. These settings are not just backdrops for action, they reflect the internal journeys of the characters. Vast cities emphasize how small Po feels outside his home, while isolated landscapes mirror Wandering Blade's emotional solitude. The world feels alive, complex, and filled with histories that exist independently of Po's legend. The antagonists, the weasels pursuing the weapons, serve as a thematic mirror to the heroes. Their obsession with control and dominance underscores the central question of the narrative. What is power for? Unlike previous villains driven by personal trauma or ideological extremes, these characters represent opportunism. They are not trying to prove a point or correct a perceived injustice. They simply want more. This makes them particularly dangerous because there is no emotional leverage to appeal to, no hidden vulnerability to exploit. They believe the world is something to be taken, not protected. As Po and Wandering Blade race against time, each encounter with a weapon reveals new layers of consequence. The weapons themselves are not just powerful objects, they are symbols of temptation. Even in the hands of those with good intentions, they threaten to distort judgment. This idea is woven subtly into the narrative, reminding the audience that heroism is not defined by what one can wield, but by what one chooses not to use. Poe's growth is evidence in his increasing awareness of this truth, as he resists the urge to rely on brute force and instead leans into wisdom and restraint. The emotional core of the story deepens as Wandering Blade's past comes into clearer focus. Her motivation is rooted in betrayal and loss, shaping her belief that justice must be absolute. Through her, the series explores the cost of living by an uncompromising code. While such discipline can create formidable warriors, it can also isolate them, leaving little room for healing. Poe's influence on her is gradual and unforced, offering moments of levity and empathy that challenge her rigid worldview without dismissing her pain. At the same time, Poe is forced to confront his own vulnerabilities. Away from the Valley of Peace, his reputation does not always precede him. He is questioned, doubted, and at times dismissed. These moments strip away the comfort of being universally admired and force Poe to define himself not by how others see him, but by the choices he makes when no one is watching. This internal struggle gives the narrative its emotional momentum, transforming the adventure into a journey of self-redefinition. Action sequences are paced to emphasize consequence rather than spectacle alone. Every clash feels purposeful, driven by character decisions rather than obligation to formula. The choreography reflects the evolving partnership between Poe and Wandering Blade, initially marked by misalignment and hesitation, later flowing with trust and mutual respect. Their fighting styles begin to complement each other, visually reinforcing the idea that unity does not require sameness. As the stakes escalate, the looming possibility of global destruction becomes more tangible. The idea that the world could be reshaped by a handful of artifacts underscores the fragility of peace. Yet the narrative resists cynicism. Even as danger spreads, the story maintains a belief in growth, cooperation, and the capacity for change. This balance between threat and hope is a defining feature of the Kung Fu Panda franchise, and The Dragon Knight carries it forward in a way that feels earned rather than nostalgic. The climax brings together the series' central themes in a confrontation that tests not just physical strength, but moral clarity. Poe's journey toward redemption reaches its turning point here, not through a single triumphant act, but through a willingness to accept responsibility and trust others. Wandering Blade's arc finds resolution as she learns that justice and mercy are not opposites, but partners. The weapons, once symbols of overwhelming force, are ultimately diminished by the realization that true power lies in restraint and understanding. In its resolution, The Dragon Knight does not attempt to close the book on Poe's story. Instead, it reframes his role in the world. He is no longer just a guardian of a single valley, nor merely a symbol of past victories. He becomes a bridge between cultures, philosophies, and generations of warriors. This evolution feels natural, reflecting the franchise's ongoing interest in growth, rather than repetition. The tone throughout remains accessible and engaging, blending humor with reflection in a way that feels distinctly Kung Fu Panda. Poe's humor is no longer just comic relief. It becomes a coping mechanism, a way of processing uncertainty and fear. The lighter moments provide contrast that makes the darker themes resonate more deeply, ensuring that the story never loses its emotional balance. Ultimately, Kung Fu Panda: The Dragon Knight stands as a story about movement, both physical and emotional. It is about leaving home, questioning identity, and discovering that redemption is not about correcting a single mistake, but about choosing to move forward with humility and courage. By pairing Poe with a character who challenges his assumptions at every turn, the series revitalizes its core message that greatness is not defined by destiny, but by the willingness to learn, adapt, and care. As the journey comes to a close, the world feels larger, the characters feel deeper, and the future feels open. The Dragon Knight does not rely on nostalgia alone to carry its weight. Instead, it expands the mythology with confidence, inviting audiences to see Poe not just as the hero he was, but as the one he is still becoming.